My boyfriend believed I'd never leave, so he kept choosing another woman every weekend. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 29 when my boyfriend gave me an ultimatum he was certain I would never accept. Ethan Carter and I had been together for 3 years, and he'd lived in my condo for the last one. We weren't perfect, but our life felt real. We split groceries, argued over whose turn it was to empty the dishwasher, watched terrible crime shows on Sunday nights, and casually talked about getting married once our careers settled down. Looking back, I can't point to one dramatic moment when everything fell apart. It happened quietly, one excuse at a time, until weekends stopped belonging to us. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A Friday happy hour somehow stretched until 2 in the morning. The following weekend, he came home from a birthday party, but couldn't even remember whose birthday he'd supposedly celebrated. Before long, entire weekends disappeared behind the same vague explanations. Some of the guys are getting together. Work thing. Olivia needs help with a presentation. Olivia Hayes was 27 and worked with Ethan. I'd met her twice at company events. She was confident, polished, and somehow came up in conversation often enough that I knew she drank iced coffee even in winter and had recently moved into an apartment about 20 minutes away. According to Ethan, she was just a co-worker. At the time, I believed him because I had no reason not to. What bothered me wasn't Olivia. It was Ethan. Every ordinary question suddenly sounded like an accusation to him. What time will you be home? Why? So I know if I should wait up. I don't know, Claire. Don't make it a thing. A few nights later, I asked who he was meeting. He barely looked up from his phone. Do I need to submit an itinerary now? I laughed because I thought he was teasing. He wasn't. After that, I stopped asking as many questions and started paying attention instead. His phone was always face down. He showered the second he got home. A brand new shirt appeared in the closet, even though I handled most of our laundry and knew I'd never seen it before. Then I noticed something else. We shared an old tablet for streaming, travel bookings, and controlling the smart home system. Ethan also signed into the same account whenever his phone was charging. One night, while looking for a restaurant reservation, I realized the shared location history was still turned on. My finger hovered over the screen for several seconds before I finally opened it. The previous Friday, Ethan hadn't ended the night downtown with co-workers like he'd claimed. His last stop was an apartment complex 20 minutes away. I checked the next Saturday, then the weekend before that. Every search ended at the same address, Olivia's apartment. I tried to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe co-workers gathered there after work. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Or maybe Ethan had already convinced me that every instinct I had was wrong. So I waited one more weekend. That Friday night, Ethan walked out of our bedroom a little after 9 wearing dark jeans, a fitted black shirt I'd never seen before, and enough cologne to fill the hallway before he even spoke. He stopped in front of the mirror to straighten his collar. Going somewhere? I asked. Out. With who? I didn't even try to hide his irritation. Friends. Which friends? He turned toward me with a tired sigh, as if I'd asked something unreasonable. Does it matter? It was the same reaction I'd been getting for weeks. Every ordinary question somehow became proof that I didn't trust him. I was just asking. No, Claire. You've been doing this non-stop. Doing what? Keeping tabs on me. I took a slow breath before answering. Asking where my boyfriend is spending a Friday night isn't keeping tabs on him. He laughed without any humor. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Every conversation turns into an interrogation. I'd asked exactly 2 questions, but correcting him suddenly felt pointless. So where are you really going? I already told you. Is Olivia going? For a fraction of a second, his expression changed. It disappeared almost instantly. She's with the group sometimes. So that's a yes. He shoved his keys into his pocket and shook his head. You know what? I'm done with this. Change your attitude, or we're done. The words hung between us, and suddenly everything made sense. Ethan wasn't giving me a choice because he thought I might leave. He was giving me one because he was certain I wouldn't. He expected me to panic, apologize, and promise never to question him again. Instead, I nodded. Okay. He frowned. Okay, what? I choose done. At first, he looked confused, then the confidence drained from his face. Claire, stop. You gave me a choice. I'm simply accepting it. You're ending a 3-year relationship because I'm going out with friends? No, I said quietly. I'm ending it because every honest question has become a fight. You'll regret this tomorrow. Maybe. That single word unsettled him more than any argument ever could. He lingered by the door, clearly waiting for me to chase after him. But I never moved. Before leaving, he threw one last accusation over his shoulder. Don't come crying to me when you realize you destroyed this relationship because you're jealous. I almost told him I already knew exactly where he'd been spending every weekend. I almost said Olivia's name, but confronting him would only give him another opportunity to lie. So I let him go. The second the door closed, I picked up the tablet. I watched the location icon move across the city before stopping at the same apartment building it had visited every Friday and Saturday for nearly 3 months. Olivia Hayes. I kept staring until the screen dimmed. I expected heartbreak. Instead of heartbreak, I felt something I'd been missing for months. For the first time, I wasn't guessing anymore. I finally knew the truth. I walked into our bedroom, pulled 2 suitcases from the closet, and started packing everything that belonged to Ethan. Clothes, shoes, toiletries, the watch I'd given him for our 2nd anniversary, even the leather weekend bag he'd taken on all those mysterious trips. Every drawer I emptied seemed to lift another weight off my shoulders. For months, I'd twisted myself into knots, searching for complicated answers. In the end, the truth turned out to be painfully simple. Ethan had been lying, and I'd been trying to explain those lies away. Ethan had given me an ultimatum because he believed there was only one possible answer. He thought I'd always choose him. Hein had no idea I already knew where he'd been choosing to spend his weekends. By the time I finished, 3 suitcases and 4 boxes filled the living room. I wasn't destroying his things or throwing them away. I was simply returning them to the place where he clearly wanted to build his life. Before leaving, I paused in the middle of the condo. The bathroom counter was half empty. The closet finally closed without forcing it, and the silence that had once felt lonely now felt peaceful. Standing alone in the condo, I finally understood the heaviness had never come from the place itself. It came from months of lies I'd been trying to ignore. 20 minutes later, I pulled into Olivia's apartment complex. Ethan's grey sedan was parked outside exactly where the location history said it would be. After taking a few photos of the car in the building, I wrestled the first suitcase into the lobby. The concierge looked up with a polite smile. "Good evening. Can I help you?" "I'm dropping off someone's belongings." He checked the directory. "Apartment 304, Olivia Hayes?" I nodded and pulled out my phone. "I'll let him know I'm here." Ethan answered on the 3rd ring, sounding completely relaxed. "What?" "I'm downstairs." "Downstairs where?" "Olivia's apartment." I didn't answer immediately, and somehow that hesitation confirmed more than any explanation could have. "I brought your things." "What are you talking about?" "I packed everything. Since you spend nearly every weekend here, I figured it made more sense to bring your belongings to you." His breathing caught. "Claire?" "I'm in the lobby." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You should. I can see your car from the front entrance." I didn't answer for several seconds before quietly saying, "Stay there." I wasn't planning to leave. Less than 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Ethan hurried into the lobby. The expensive shirt and carefully styled appearance were gone, replaced by grey sweatpants, a loose t-shirt, and hair that looked as though he'd just run his hands through it. The confidence he'd walked out of my condo with had disappeared just as quickly. "What are you doing?" "I told you," I replied, resting a hand on the nearest suitcase. "I'm bringing your things." "You can't just come here." I tilted my head. "Why not?" He searched for an answer, but none came. There wasn't a single explanation he could give without exposing himself. Before either of us spoke again, the elevator opened and Olivia stepped into the lobby. She'd changed into leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. The moment she recognized me, she stopped in her tracks. "Oh." Her eyes shifted from Ethan to the luggage before settling on me. "Claire?" "Hi, Olivia." Neither Ethan nor Olivia looked comfortable. Ethan was the first to speak, rushing out the excuse almost before the elevator doors had finished closing. "This isn't what it looks like." A faint smile crossed my face. "That's interesting," I said. "I haven't even told you what I think it looks like." He searched for an explanation while Olivia quietly avoided my eyes. "We were just working?" Ethan seized on the word immediately. "Exactly." I turned to Olivia instead. "Were you?" She hesitated, glanced at him, then answered carefully. "We were finishing a project. At 11:30 on a Friday night, and every other Friday before this." Neither of them answered. I rested a hand on one of the suitcases and gently pushed it toward Ethan. "Good. Then this makes things easier. If this apartment has become your weekend office, there's no reason for you to keep driving back to my condo." His expression hardened. "Claire, stop making a scene." I slowly looked around the nearly empty lobby. "The only people here are us and the concierge." Almost on cue, the concierge lowered his head and pretended to focus on his computer, giving us the privacy none of us had asked for. Olivia took a cautious step forward. "Maybe we should sit down and talk." I shook my head. I've spent weeks replaying every conversation in my mind, wondering whether I was becoming paranoid. Tonight answered that question. My eyes settled on Ethan. People who are guilty rarely get angry because they're innocent. They get angry because someone finally uncovers the truth. His jaw tightened. You tracked me. I checked the location history on a tablet we both used. That's crazy. No, I replied evenly. Crazy would have been ignoring what was right in front of me just because you kept telling me I was imagining it. Olivia folded her arms. You still don't know the whole story. Then tell it. The silence that followed was far more convincing than any explanation either of them could have offered. Instead of answering, Ethan stepped closer, and for the first time that night, the confidence he'd carried out of my condo was completely gone. Claire, please. You honestly thought I'd never choose done, didn't you? He looked away before quietly admitting the one thing he should never have said. You were supposed to fight for us. The moment those words left his mouth, he realized exactly what he'd confessed. I nodded slowly. So that's what this has really been. I didn't mean it like you did. For months he'd pushed every boundary because he believed I'd always chase after him. Tonight I'd done the one thing he never imagined. For the first time, I accepted exactly what he'd shown me. I rolled the largest suitcase to his feet. Everything's here. He stared at it in disbelief. My passport. Front pocket. My watches. Wrapped so they wouldn't get scratched. You packed all of this? Every last thing. His shoulders slumped. You didn't have to. I know. He kept staring at the luggage, looking far more shaken by the care I'd taken than if I'd dumped everything into garbage bags. Olivia finally broke the silence. What are you going to do now? I'm going home. Then I smiled. My home. The correction landed immediately. Ethan finally understood what hadn't crossed his mind until that moment. The condo had always belonged to me, and there would be no walking back through that front door. He followed me into the parking lot before I reached my SUV. Claire, please, can we talk? We already have. I was angry. So was I. The difference is I didn't spend 3 months lying to you. He reached for the driver's door before I could close it. I never wanted this. I met his eyes for what I knew would probably be the last time. The saddest part is that if you'd been honest 3 months ago, we might have saved this relationship. Instead, every weekend you chose another lie, and tonight you chose the last one. I closed the door, started the engine, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, Ethan stood frozen beside 3 suitcases and 4 cardboard boxes while Olivia remained near the entrance, saying nothing. Watching them grow smaller in the distance, I realized I finally had the answer I'd spent months searching for. Driving away, I finally understood I'd never been fighting over an apartment or another woman. I'd been fighting months of lies that slowly convinced me to doubt my own judgment. The next morning, I replaced every lock in the condo. When the locksmith handed me the new keys, I realized it wasn't the metal in my hand that made me feel lighter. It was knowing Ethan could no longer let himself back into my life whenever he pleased. That peace lasted less than 24 hours. By Sunday morning, texts from unknown numbers started appearing one after another. I deleted every message without reading past the first line, blocked each new number, and went on with my day. When Monday brought a knock at my door instead, I found Ethan's best friend, Ryan, standing in the hallway wearing the uneasy expression of someone who already knew he wasn't going to change my mind. I tried anyway. Ethan just wants you to hear him out. I already did. He says you misunderstood. I held his gaze. Did he tell you where he spent every Friday and Saturday for the last 3 months? Ryan looked away. That silence answered my question better than words ever could. He says nothing happened. Funny, I said. I never asked whether they slept together. I asked why he lied. Ryan had no response because Ethan didn't have one either. He loves you. If that's what love looks like, I said quietly. I don't want another version of it. By Wednesday, Ethan switched from phone calls to email. 4 pages of apologies, excuses, and blame ended with the same argument. He lied because telling me the truth would have started a fight. I replied with a single sentence. If telling the truth would have ended our relationship, lying only delayed the ending. I blocked his email and never looked back. Olivia, on the other hand, had nothing left to say. After repeating the same vague excuses everyone else had used, she fell silent. I hope you find whatever it is you're trying to convince yourself of, I said before ending the call. That evening, I sat alone on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights spread across the skyline. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't checking anyone's location, questioning every delayed reply, or wondering whether another story made sense. Only then did I realize how exhausting a relationship becomes once trust is gone. Every ordinary moment turns into evidence, every small inconsistency into another mystery to solve, until you stop being someone's partner and start acting like their detective. A week earlier, I would have done almost anything to save what Ethan and I had built. What I missed wasn't Ethan anymore. I missed the version of him I'd spent 3 years believing was real, and I finally accepted those two men had never been the same. 2 weeks passed. The messages became less frequent, but Ethan's determination didn't. One Monday morning, my receptionist called. "Claire, there's someone downstairs asking for you." "Who?" "It's Ethan." I closed my eyes for a second. "I told him you were in a meeting," she added. "Thank you." "He says he'll wait." "He can." 10 minutes later, building security called to say he was still refusing to leave the lobby. I grabbed my blazer and headed downstairs, not because I wanted another conversation, but because I wanted this chapter of my life to end. Ethan was waiting near reception with his hands buried in his pockets. He looked nothing like the confident man who'd walked out of my condo 3 weeks earlier. Dark circles framed his eyes, his beard had grown unevenly, and exhaustion seemed to weigh on every movement. "Claire, you shouldn't be here." "I know." "Then why are you?" "I needed to see you." "You've seen me." He glanced around the busy lobby before lowering his voice. "I've replayed that night 1,000 times. So have I." I was angry. I noticed. Then, almost in a whisper, he admitted the truth. "I never thought you'd actually leave." That single sentence told me more than every excuse he'd made over the previous 3 months. He'd never believed I'd called his bluff. "You thought threatening to end our relationship would make me stop asking questions." I looked down. "I didn't think." "No," I said quietly. "You didn't." Neither of us spoke until he finally looked back at me. "I love you." Months earlier, those words would have broken me. Standing there, all I could think about was how different they sounded after 3 months of lies. "If you loved me," I asked calmly, "why did every difficult conversation end with me apologizing? Every time you came home late, every time your stories stopped making sense, somehow I became the problem." He tried to answer but couldn't. "I never wanted you to doubt yourself." "Maybe not," I said. "But you wanted me to doubt my instincts, and that's exactly what happened." His silence confirmed what neither of us needed to say aloud. A security guard approached, checking whether everything was all right. I assured him it was, then turned back to Ethan one last time. "This conversation is over." Hein took a step toward me. "Please." "I've spent 3 years listening to you. It's time I listened to myself." I walked toward the elevator without looking back. "I miss you." For a split second, those words stirred the memory of the man I'd fallen in love with. Then another image replaced it. Friday nights, excuses, lies, and Olivia's apartment. By the time the elevator doors closed, whatever I thought I still felt for Ethan had disappeared. That evening, Olivia called. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. "I know Ethan came to your office today," she said quietly. I told him not to. "You two seem to spend a lot of time discussing me." There was a brief silence before she admitted. "He still thinks he can fix this." "So do you?" She took a slow breath. "I don't think you understand what really happened." I pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table. "Then help me understand." She wrapped both hands around her coffee before speaking again. "Ethan told me the two of you were basically over. He said you were living like roommates and that he just hadn't figured out how to leave." I let her finish. "He never said a single word about ending things with me." That explanation irritated me more than anything Ethan had written in his 4-page email. So instead of talking to his girlfriend, he spent every weekend at another woman's apartment? It wasn't like that. "You've said that every time we've spoken," I replied. "But you've never explained why he lied about where he was, why he hid your address, or why both of you looked terrified the second I walked into your lobby." She stayed quiet long enough for me to realize there wasn't an answer. Finally, she whispered, "Because we knew how it looked." "No," I said gently. "You knew exactly what it was." Another long pause followed before she asked a question I hadn't expected. "Do you hate me?" I leaned back and thought about it honestly. "No, you don't. I don't know you well enough to hate you. What hurts is that the two of you spent months convincing me my instincts were wrong." Her voice cracked. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "Soon." A tired smile crossed my face. "Soon is where every comfortable liar hides." She never argued again. A quiet apology was the last thing I heard before the call ended. 3 days later, another piece of the story surfaced without me looking for it. My college friend Megan, who worked with Ethan, asked me to meet after work. She barely touched her coffee before opening a photo from a company retreat 6 months earlier. "I wasn't trying to spy," she said. "But after everything happened, I remembered this. The picture showed dozens of employees smiling at the camera. In the background, Ethan wasn't looking toward the photographer. His attention was fixed entirely on Olivia, one hand resting lightly against the small of her back. The photo wasn't proof of an affair. It didn't need to be. It proved something else, that whatever existed between them had started long before Ethan admitted it. They'd been like that for months, Megan said quietly, long before anyone in the office started talking. I handed the phone back. I think you're the first person who's told me the truth without asking me to doubt myself first. By the fourth week, Ethan's calls had almost stopped, but not because he'd accepted the breakup. Ryan later admitted people had finally begun asking him the one question he'd spent months avoiding. If nothing happened, Ryan asked him, why did you lie every single weekend? Ryan sat quietly for a moment, turning his coffee cup between his hands before finally looking at me. I guess I wanted to believe my best friend, he admitted, but I should have listened to both sides before I came to your door. I understand. No, he said, shaking his head. I don't think you do. I judged you before I even knew what had happened. His apology sounded genuine, and for the first time since we'd sat down, the tension between us eased. Do you think you'll ever forgive Ethan? He asked. I already have. He stared at me in surprise. I've let go of the anger, I explained. That doesn't mean I'd ever let him back into my life. Forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing. Ryan nodded slowly. I don't think he's figured that out yet. He probably never will. About a week later, another surprise arrived in the form of a certified letter. It wasn't from Ethan, but from an attorney. For a moment, I thought he was actually trying to sue me. Instead, he claimed I'd failed to return several expensive belongings, including a watch, a pair of designer sunglasses, and a leather briefcase. I almost laughed. Everything from the night I packed his things was sitting in a folder on my computer labeled Move Out. I'd photographed every suitcase, every box, and every valuable item before loading them into my SUV. I also had the time-stamped photos from Olivia's apartment, the concierge's delivery record, and pictures of Ethan standing beside his luggage that night. I forwarded everything to his attorney with a single sentence. Please compare these photographs with your client's claims. 2 days later, his attorney emailed to withdraw every claim and thanked me for the documentation. There was no apology, but by then I didn't need one. Having the truth documented was enough. About a month later, I ran into Ethan by accident at the neighborhood coffee shop. He looked thinner than I remembered, with tired eyes and the worn expression of someone still living with the consequences of his own decisions. Claire? Ethan. After an awkward pause, he asked if we could talk. I almost walked away, but instead I gave him 5 minutes. I've had a lot of time to think, he began. I was an idiot. I kept telling myself I'd explain everything later. You mean you thought you'd eventually decide which woman you wanted? He flinched. I never saw it that way. But that's exactly what you were doing. He rubbed his forehead and let out a tired laugh. I never meant to hurt you. Nobody plans to. They just keep making choices that do. His eyes filled with regret. I loved you. I believe you. I looked genuinely surprised. You do? I think you loved me, I said quietly. You just loved avoiding consequences even more. The words seemed to drain the last of the hope from his face. He admitted he'd kept waiting for the right moment to tell me the truth. The right moment was before the first lie. He nodded slowly. If I could go back. You can't. I've replayed that night 1,000 times. So have I. He searched my face as though hoping time had changed my answer. And? I held his gaze. I still choose done. He closed his eyes for a moment, accepting what he should have understood weeks earlier. I deserved that. Yes. I thought you'd fight for us. A small smile crossed my face. I did, for 3 years. You just didn't notice because I was fighting alone. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. This time, I believed him. Not because the apology changed anything, but because there was nothing left for him to gain by saying it. I know, I replied, and I hope you learn from it. As I turned toward the cafe, he called my name one last time. You really don't hate me? I thought about the lies, the weekends, the sleepless nights, and every moment I'd spent questioning my own instincts. Hating you would mean carrying all of this forever, I said. I've carried enough. That was the last time I ever saw Ethan. Life grew quiet after that. I earned a promotion, started traveling again, spent more time with my family, and eventually agreed to a blind date. Not because I needed another relationship, but because I was no longer afraid of one. People still ask why I didn't fight harder for the relationship. The answer is simple. I was never fighting another woman. I was fighting months of lies that slowly taught me to distrust my own instincts. And once that happens, love isn't enough to save what's left. I never exposed Ethan online or tried to destroy his reputation. I simply accepted the ultimatum he gave me. When he said, "Change your attitude or we're done," I believed the only part that mattered. We're done. Looking back, packing those suitcases wasn't revenge. It was the moment I stopped sacrificing my peace to protect someone who had already stopped protecting my heart. Ethan's biggest mistake wasn't falling for another woman. It was believing I'd always stay no matter how many times he chose someone else over me. He believed I'd still be there whenever he finally decided I was enough. The night I packed those suitcases proved him wrong. Whenever I think about that night now, I don't remember the argument in my condo. I remember Ethan standing outside Olivia's apartment beside 3 suitcases and 4 cardboard boxes, finally facing the consequences he'd spent months trying to postpone. That wasn't the night I lost my relationship. It was the night I finally stopped losing myself.